All righty. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I am Hayley Mitchell-Haugen. I am the editor of Sheila-Na-Gig Poetry Journal Online and Sheila-Na-Gig Editions. And today we are very excited to have gathered a number of readers together. We are celebrating the work of Kersten Christianson and the publication of her new collection of poetry. This is called Curating the House of Nostalgia. And Kersten joins us from Alaska, and I will read your bio in just a moment, Kersten. And we also have a number of wonderful readers today, great supporters of Sheila-Na-Gig Online. Everyone reading today has appeared in one or many more of our issues. We have a lot of frequent contributors here today. And also some other contributors who also have books published or coming out through Sheila-Na-Gig Editions. So welcome all of you, and I will just briefly introduce you as we move on to the readings. Okay, but we'll be starting with Kersten Christianson. And as I'm going to read her bio on the back of the book here. So Kersten is the author of Something Yet to Be Named by Kelsey Books in 2017. And What Caught Raven's Eye by Petroglyph Press in 2018. Her poetry has published in Comus Magazine, San Pedro River Review, the Bangor Literary Journal, Whiskey Island, the Northern Review, and elsewhere. And she's been a writer in residence at the Alderworks Alaska Writers and Artists Retreat in Daya. She's the poetry editor of Alaska Women Speak, and she holds an MFA in creative writing and the literary arts from the University of Alaska in Anchorage. By career, she is a secondary English teacher, and she lives in Sitka, Alaska. And I first met Kersten just as I first opened Sheila-Na-Gig. She was one of the very early issues in Sheila-Na-Gig Online, and that's how we met. And I knew very quickly that once I started publishing books that hers would be one that I would take up at some point. So I'm very happy to present this book to the world, Curating the House of Nostalgia with Kersten Christianson. Welcome, Kersten.
All right. Well, thank you. I have so much gratitude for you, Hayley, for pushing this out into the reading world. It was kind of that unexpected publication, and there's always backstory to a book. I think about the two prior collections that I had published, and they were a little more whimsical and working books, and this one was a little more unexpected. I had very unexpectedly and suddenly, my husband passed away in 2017, and it's interesting, now living through COVID and times of stress and stay alone and stay sheltered and social distancing and all that. And many people say, well, I can't possibly write during this time, and I think a lot about that. I think a lot about those moments in our lives that create great trauma or great isolation, or kind of move us into that headspace. And that's kind of the backstory that originated, or that prompted this particular manuscript. About 7 months after he passed, I had applied to the Alderworks writing residency in Daya, Alaska, which is just kind of the end of the road outside of Skagway, about 10 miles, and was accepted. And, my peer group, everyone just jumped in. I had grandparents take my daughter, I had a friend take my dogs, I had house sitters come in for that summer, I had a friend join me in Skagway for, some travel time afterwards. And just helped make this happen. And I was given a cabin for a month to just write. And it was kind of a saving grace for me to go and hole up and just hear the voice of what this manuscript could be. It gave me something to do. It gave me something to lean on. It kept me writing, which is huge. And I put together the original manuscript, and it was titled Clutter and Scree. and I sent it off to Sheila-Na-Gig, because I think all writers, they have an idea of where they would love to publish. And Sheila-Na-Gig was very high on my list. I think it was in that #1 spot. So I sent it off, and gosh, Hayley's a fantastic editor, because at the end of summer or early fall, she wrote back and said, I'd like to publish a manuscript, but here's the ratio of poems that probably can go, no titles, just a ratio. And that just kept me moving forward. I took all of the printed off poems and I hung them on a now empty room in my house, and just kind of spent the winter moving, taking down, because I had taped them all up, rearranging, tearing in half, and writing new material to plunk in. And what originally began as, this book of just grieving, of poems that were too close and too raw, became something different. And I think just that time to think about what I wanted it to become, everything changed in the book. It suddenly had a new title, so Curating the House of Nostalgia. It was driven by this cover art, that you see on the front, which is titled What's Left Behind by local artist Cara Jane Murray. And yeah, I just really liked it for the 3 chairs on top of this kind of lonesome stone mountain. It just reminded me of, the family of 3 that I was for so long. And then I went through and even gave it a new backbone. So I organized, the collection into sections, which I'd never done before. So the first section is titled Mountain, and then Clutter, Cataclysm, Astral, Juncture, and Epilogue. And so it began to feel like a process of curating, like what poems do I throw away? What poems do I get rid of? What poems do I bring in to make this other piece, this other idea for this book work? And so there are still a lot of those, those grieving poems in this book, but it's something else too, and it's something that is very close to me. And I'm just incredibly grateful that Sheila-Na-Gig published this, because I just am. And so Hayley, I thank you for putting it out into the reading world, and I really do mean that. So I was so excited when it finally came through. It was like, oh, here it is. It's this book. And so I thought, I've marked several that I thought I'd read today. And then I'll probably just kind of skip around. But this is Curating the House of Nostalgia. So let me grab my reading glasses, because otherwise I'm going to be all over the place. When I originally put this together, I had organized it to have a haibun in every section. And then I ended up pulling 1 or 2 of them, but there's still several in here. So the collection begins with a haibun. Curate. In the shadow of the Kluane squats the House of Nostalgia, its portals shuttered with plywood eyelids, tangled weeds its lashes, hookers oat grass, sedge, foxtail. I have heard it hoards toy trains standing still, hockey pucks without a match, driftwood shaped like an unruly midwife, birthing long silence boat motors, salt air-crusted license plates, Yukon, Alaska, Germany. From a high shelf watches the gossamer skull of a horse recovered from the Dalton Trail, its halves stitched whole with the hair of a wild Russian boar. Shadows of meteoric leaves, slivers of sun flicker jig in the wind, slink through the cracks to burnish cobwebs, dust, errant cottonwood seeds drifting from head to heart. This could be the home of the 50,000-year-old wolf pup gleaned from permafrost near Dawson City by a miner toiling under high summer sun, her skin a tight drum measuring the backhanded beating of time, her lashes a reluctant wonder along her cheek. Slivers of sun ignite darkness, spotlight the minions that parade my own needled nostalgia, the past a violet green swallow at midnight in June. In winter, I once held tightly another's hand here, whispering, listen. Listen to the absence of sound, the sound of stars. We belong here. Buddha says something like this: love much, live gently, know when to let go. My husband and I, we spent a lot of time up in the Yukon. And so a lot of my poems derive from, kind of these wild places, these remote places. And this one is from a little teeny tiny hole in the wall, Kino City, which there's nothing city about it. It's a snack shop and a hotel and a hill that you can drive up and see a signpost. Kino Hill, a summit sign posts cities, distances in kilometers, dim bearing on the lodge pole pine rooted at kilometer 6. Our pitted road footnotes clusters of wild rhubarb, willow, white mountain heather, a butterfly trail. My zenith, with you I bask, trek off the chart, skin to skin, we love our way through a bonfire north. Another one from a remote area in that region. This one's titled From Night's Window. Bee balm and forget-me-nots, lupin cluster balm by north's long sun. Thin white cuticle of shape-shifting moon won't be viewed from this June mountain of birch trees and burls, crinkled vellum, pregnant belly knotted wood. Pack your magic and drive, wander widely the pockmarked road. Find the place where you think you can translate the wind, the silence into wild. We spent probably 20 years traveling Canada, from Yukon to St. John's, Newfoundland and back. And so it came to feel a lot like home. And both my husband and I still teach, he was a teacher as well. And so we had a fair chunk of time to, either stick around and hang out at home or go hit the road. And we did that. So we were all over the place. This one I wrote, actually it's for my friend Karen, and she's on here. And Karen, she is a good friend, and she was the friend who traveled up to Skagway after my residency and just kind of told me archetypal stories of, this is how you get through this is how you write it out, and things will be okay again. And so my gratitude is huge, for this friend who shows me, this way of getting through. And so we had a lot of, because the Yukon is just spread out, it's a lot of, wilderness, and towns are kind of far flung in between. We had a lot of time to visit and share stories. So this one's for Karen. Men who serve you coffee, for Karen. Steamy, like men who wake before the body gaze of day, to capture water before boil, flood the press, clatter around your kitchen barefooted, beaned, French roast, Yukon chaga, simple Folgers, of little matter, but served in bed. Swarthy, like Pasilla Mariana, heady boreal, you walk among the seed and layers of rafters, skiers, smooth talkers, loggers. Coffee, a story, a heart lost to a longshoreman, chance encounters with international politicos who confirm your beauty, offer refugee status, should you one day cross that border between what is and could be. To the plangency of beat-skipping bar tunes, two-stepping wildly with lanky fathers, sons, your own wild spirit cupped in the nest of your palm, wrapping your hands around a hot mug in the morning. I tried to include some lighthearted ones in here too. And I am never a fan, I guess I never pushed myself to write a lot of rhyming poetry, but this was one that I just kind of giggle at anytime I come across it. So I knew I had to throw it in here somehow. Lessons learned from Scandia Noir. Live only in this moment, the past is dead, not so different from the body washed up on shore. You can survive on dill pickles, rye bread, frozen pizza, organic espresso from El Salvador. Forgo the greeting, answer calls with your name, all that personal angst, depression, anxiety, bury between the frozen, clouded panes of a window frame. Ignore the boss, his endless points teeter over wary. And if you forget to carry your gun into a precarious setting, you have your wits about you, the hopeful politeness of humanity, the living without bothersome regretting. You can still neutralize a threat, render them lifeless. And it is ever snowing. And in the case of a golden, brief glow of summer, don't fret, winter is beholden. So yeah, I'm quite a fan of all dark shows, Scandia Noir. Let's see here. Little Salmon Lake. Part of our draw to the Yukon in more recent years was to find a place we could retire to. And so we would show up in Whitehorse, kind of the metropolis of the Yukon. And we had established a relationship, a working relationship with one of the realtors there. And so she knew that if we showed up on winter break or in the summer, which we typically did, she would give us keys and say, go check this place out, return the keys tomorrow. And so we were all over the place, just free to, unlock a door, walk through a house, determine if that's what we were looking for or not, and then return the keys later. And so this was one of those places that we had visited. It was more of a summer place. There's no way I'd live there in the winter. Oof, cold, but Little Salmon Lake. In my half dream, the black bear follows under thread-strung leaves in opal apple hues, not quite flame, but golden, circling the roots of poplar, white birch, anchored in hoarfrost. And in this half dream, I trail you into the forest, peppered by leaf fall, crusted and rhymed. Our laughter as warm as the promised soup pot. After a cold trek to a cabin we did not acquire, its windows eyeing the lake. Anguish is tangible, the pocked skin of a mandarin. At the sun's tumble, the world flares orange, our old joy, the fruit inside, as daylight roots into dusk. Here in Sitka, this is the time of year that the bears are supposed to be heading up and denning, but there's always this period of wildness. The salmon are done running in the rivers and garbage is left out, for garbage day. And a lot of there are bears that, meet their untimely end, by harassing dogs or killing dogs. In fact, we just had a dog killed in a neighborhood a few nights ago by a bear that they're now tracking, and they can't move up into the mountains, fast enough. So this one's titled Da Vinci's A Bear Walking. An eerie likeness between a bear's paw and a human's hand. We don't realize this until the bear is skinned, splayed on a blue tarp, cracked open for viewing. Hands hold the power to grab, fend, and cuff, protect the young, sustain. Our hands can dart, miss the mark, dispatch the wild beast roaming the dark woods, traveling its enduring trails. Haynes Highway. This one was after a poem by Ted Kooser. The highway winds like a slow clock along the Chilkat River. Dandelion seeds waft to the Empyrean. This, the second hand of Alaska. Riding the curves, you miss him at the wheel, your eyes darting upward, catching morning light flounce its patchworked skirt among peaks whose names are known only by locals. Just before the border crossing, a roadside lake. A trumpeter swan or two claim residence. Sapsuckers hammer burrows into snags, flit and flutter from the forest to their young. You feel like that, mother your child from afar, hover between the world of foliage and a bare wood nest. You feel like sliding into the shoulder, setting the emergency brake. You feel like walking into the canopy, into the mountain's lantern. The final full-length poem of the collection is another haibun, and it's titled "To the Cabin Named Mary Jane," and that was actually the cabin I stayed in at Alderworks, and Mary Jane was named after a gin drinking grandma, and I thought, oh, I got to work something into my writing about her, but it's about the cabin. So, to the cabin named Mary Jane. Carry with you the stones, the worn paper journal, set lined paper and pen aside. Instead of one linear page after another, write your thoughts on the cloud-dappled sky with cherry blossom branch, floral ink, sharpened wood utensil. Baby sapsuckers will visit you on the front porch, cry for words, peer inside the open chamber of your heart. They cock their tiny heads at the scrape of a chair, the tinny whine of a chime. Who could apperceive their inquisitiveness, their stretched neck feline curiosity? We all crane our necks for the whimsical, the weird, the unknown. Louis Armstrong's "What a Wonderful World" buttering rooftops on a gusty summer night. Slant spotlight, crazy quilting, wild iris, babbled exchange of aurora and wildfire at Windy Arm. Sweet husband, you emerged from a land of strawberries and cream, a baby weaned on oatmeal, malto meal, whole milk. You were born for the faraway, the crinkle-eyed squint for green flash before the dark. I will know you again, the flick of your wrist, your calloused fingertips pushing flecks of gold into the safety of seam, the separation of precious from ordinary. Gather this glimmer in tiny vials to net sunshine from a windowsill. I want to drink every last drop, Goldschlager gone rogue with Yukon Wild, mineral marveled by your warm touch. It has never mixed easily with the earth, this halcyon, this summer of present tense. Oh, sweet cabin of stout walls, spirit, writing can save your goddamn life. And then the collection, because I dedicated it to my daughter, in thinking of everything that's passed, I have an epilogue at the end, and I was in my MFA years, there was a period of time where I was really interested in reading Japanese death poems and just a short little, that little idea of a writer, of a poet, knowing that their end was coming and what would they say in those last minutes. And so, I'd spent a lot of time kind of perusing and reading up on them. And so I wanted to end the collection with an epilogue, kind of written in that way, but for my daughter. So it's very short. It's titled "Write." On my final breath, let me write a death poem to daughter and stars, alchemy of days, of road, of returning to the earth. And that's a sampling of the book from beginning to end. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share it because, like I said, I think of all these little collections I have. This one is, it's right here. It's my heart.
Thank you for sharing, Kersten, and for the stories behind the poems too. It's so wonderful. And I've been looking at the chats that people are posting, and you probably didn't get a chance to see them as you're reading, but you can go back and look at those. But mentioning, a number of people mentioning how your poems transport us to that world and the minutia of the natural world and just your travels that, you know, so many of us aren't going to get that opportunity to walk those spaces that you're in physically.
Thank you. I
And
appreciate that.
while Kirsten's work is fresh in her mind, does anybody have any questions for her? Any comments you'd like to make before we do our open mic reading?
I had a question.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved your poems, and you know, in every single one, nature was a huge component, but I don't know that they would be classified as nature poems. So I wonder if that's always present in your work, if that was kind of an outcome of staying in the cabin, if it's an outcome of Alaska, if it's part of your process, because I know some writers will go outside, right, of the indoors to write. So I was just curious about how that manifested.
You know, I think for me, it's definitely a setting that's always close to what I'm writing. And I think it's just because of the traveling that I've done. Everything is just rooted in nature. And so I think probably all of my work has some element of that. Well, maybe not, well, I guess Scandia Noir does too, you know, to a degree. But everywhere I've traveled, be it the Yukon or across Canada, I mean, we would look for the roads not traveled. We would look for those experiences that, you know, others have had, we've never had. And so, you know, it was not unusual to go and hole up in a tent somewhere for, you know, weeks at a time and just see what was there. And it definitely plays a role, you know, I think. And it would be hard for me to separate it. And maybe that's why I'm terrible at writing, you know, like I can't write a political poem at all, you know, worth my life, you know. But I can weave nature in a way that helps me unpack a story. And I think that's what my writing tends to be. It's a good question though. Oh my gosh. One I haven't thought about really.
I was curious about your title because I really love the title. Did you come up with that, or is that a line from something?
There's actually, in one of the little towns we traveled to, there's a museum that an older man had put together called the Museum of Nostalgia. And it was never open. So we never got a chance to walk through it. But it seems to me he just collected a wide array of stuff that would kind of land in his lap, and he'd put it up as a museum. And so I was thinking of that place, and I thought, you know, this whole grieving experience, you know, it really was a process of curating, like what do you keep and what do you discard? And it's still, what, 3 years in, and I'm still trying to figure that piece out. And then I saw Kara's artwork, you know, and for me, looking at those blue stones, you know, all in a pile, and how if I were to take them and organize them in different ways, you know, how do I do that? How do I take these and put them into different piles? Do I do it by size? Do I do it by color, by tone? And then the 3 chairs that are left behind. And it just reminded me of this museum I never got a chance to visit. And it reminded me of the story I'm now living that I never thought I would live, you know, and it was the tie-in piece, you know, and the title just kind of came after that because my house has definitely been curated.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. And we can return to questions after the open mic as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. We have 10 readers today who are all, as I mentioned earlier, Sheila-Na-Gig online contributors and or Sheila-Na-Gig edition writers. So thank you all for spending your Sunday with us. I appreciate you coming. And our first reader is Lisa Stice. And Lisa was in one of the very first, certainly in the first year of issues that I published in Sheila-Na-Gig online. And I remember looking at those first couple of issues and just thinking, wow, but the quality of work that I got from the first batch of people who were submitting, and just realizing I can do this and it's going to be great. And now we're 5 years into it, and which is unbelievable to me, and working on publishing these 8th collection for Sheila-Na-Gig editions. So it's just really, you know, turned into something wonderful. But it all started with writers like Lisa, who, you know, sent in work and made me go, wow. So thank you for being one of those early contributors, Lisa. Welcome.
Thank you. And thank you, Hayley, for Sheila-Na-Gig and for this. And it's really nice because I'm seeing like there's other people, you know, on here that I've read in Sheila-Na-Gig and have read in other places. You know, it's like you make those little connections and you follow people all over the place. And now, you know, I get to hear voices and see actual people instead of just photographs. It's kind of cool. And congratulations, Kersten. I'm really excited for you. But so poems I picked one about that I wrote for my daughter, and I thought that would be appropriate. So Kirsten and I kind of have that same connection of writing about our daughters often, but this one is called Such is the Art of Warfare. Sometimes her mother would worry about her, that she would be lonesome all by herself with a dog for a brother in this out-of-the-way place where we are only acquainted with neighbors and only some. This is the art of studying circumstances. She pitched up camp between sofa and coffee table, under pillows and cushions. She said, I like it better here. She liked to smell the flowers handpicked from air, hold their invisible petals against her face, breathe the scent of once upon a time. This is the art of studying moods. And so her mother knew she was not lonesome. She was like a mountain, like a fire, like a thunderbolt. Her mother whispered, let your plans be impenetrable. This is the art of self-preservation. And then this one is kind of went through a period where I was writing poetry kind of to my husband's in the military. And so through a period where I was writing poems, I was doing a lot of reading and began writing responses to poets that I was reading and the connections that I was feeling in this time period when my husband, well, my husband's always gone a lot. So time period of him always being gone, I guess. Dear Henry Reed, and the World War II poet. Dear Henry Reed, the bees are at war with the flowers this morning, and so I think of you and wonder how to name the parts of my life. We call this building a home, but it isn't ours. Borrowed walls and roof, a place in between movement. And my husband has a billet, all the duties therewith. What's my assignment then? One who assembles all the dismantled parts seems too awkward a title. And there are friends I name, faraway friends, and friends whose names fade away after time. But these flowers are always gardenias, these always pansies, no matter the yard where bees drone their humdrum battle cries. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Okay, we have one reader who's not here, so we're going to skip up in the line, and that's going to bring us to you, Vivian. So I want to welcome Vivian Faith Prescott, who has the best view of any writing room on the planet. I am absolutely sure of it. I just love all the shots you post of your beautiful space in Alaska. And Vivian wrote one of the blurbs for the back of Kirsten's book, so you may have noticed that if you have her book, and was also one of our quarterly contest poetry winners. And one of her pieces from Sheila-Na-Gig Online won an honorable mention for the best of the net the year that that went up, and that's tough to do, right? So to get that recognition, so really great work. So Vivian, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Well, first I want to congratulate Kersten on her book. Kersten and I are in a writers group together called Blue Canoe Writers, and we actually met in Sitka. I live in Wrangell now, but what you want to know about Kersten too is she also likes to dig in garbage, because she came to visit me here in Wrangell after I moved, and we have a garbage dump beach. So from the 1955, prior to like 100 years, people dumped their garbage on the beach. So, oh, there you go. She's got something she made from the garbage. So I invited her down to write, stay in my cabin, and dig garbage. So we did. It's really fun, trust me. It is fun because you can find old hair tonic from 1870 and all kinds of really cool stuff, glass and whatnot. So anyway, Kirsten likes garbage. I'm sure she has garbage dump poems too. But this poem I'm going to read is from the journal when I did win the contest for summer, and I was really surprised. Kersten actually encouraged me to submit to Sheila-Na-Gig, and so I did. This poem is called, I'm reading it from my iPhone, so anyway, it's called Indicators. There is mention of ambient noise, how seals hide from killer whales among the pop and burst of a melting glacier. There are arguments concerning how high we live above the present sea, how our tidal days are spent with irregular fluctuations. Old folks comment how the winter sky has faded into a dull blue smoke. But all this talk weighs less than a season of dust, and who am I to question this weeping we have awakened? Every week I participate in a familiar rite, rebuilding my seawall, washing sea spray from my living room windows, knowing there's a time-honored way we revel the sea lingering in our lungs and its rinsing of our wounds. Speaking of that, I did have a really bad storm a few days ago, and it almost washed out my stairs to the beach. And right now I have seaweed flung on my windows. So it gets kind of scary in a big storm. And we have more storms now too, so. Also, what you might not know about Kersten, she you're still the poetry editor, right, of Alaska Women Speak. So it's a journal, and they have different themes. And she encouraged some of us in the writers group, I don't know, quite a few years ago to start submitting our work through Alaska Women Speak. And so I've had a few things published in there. And I think this issue is summer of 2020. They always have really interesting themes too, is fairy tales. And so kind of mythology. And so this poem is from the Alaska Women Speaks fairy tales issue. It's called Salmon Woman Swims Through Her Own Myth. Begin in fresh water, out of anesthesia, tubes bursting with fry and cysts. The surgeon says there's a pregnancy. We didn't foresee this. But now you and your yolk sac are soaked in chemicals, and you imagine a missing fin, a two-headed alvin, gillless even. At 16 years old, the island folk instruct you, hatch, migrate, spawn, and die. There's a salmon cycle, a tradition. You know this. Yet with the yolk sac still attached to your belly, the natal stream has been interrupted. You want to surface from the shallow gravel bed, fill up your bladder with oxygen, head directly to sea. but the doctor says it's $1,000 and 1,000 miles to migrate from our small river delta island. And you already have one young child and don't have two fins to rub together. So you do what salmon women have always done, avoid predators and swim tail first into cajoling a goddess. Saraka, she obliges. She opens your red, dislodges stones and pebbles, flushes everything downstream. There are no tears. After all, you are named for the leaper, and the pink-hued morning sky awaits your delight. Another cycle refreshes, and you turn 17 and flat-bellied. Your silver scales flash sunlight, and you walk barefoot in the cold creek through a bubble curtain, wading past the bend of your recreated journey. So anyway, thank you. And this is a view from my fish camp, which you probably can't see. There's the islands right there out front. Anyway, and that's Samovius Strait.
Just amazing. And you get to watch whales jumping and seals and all kinds of great things.
Or really every once in a while I'll look out and think, oh, it's so peaceful and beautiful. And then a sea lion comes up and all of a sudden it's ripping apart a octopus. And it's the most violent, incredible, fascinating, awful thing you'll see. Anyway, that happens actually quite often.
Great, thank you. All righty, so we are going to turn from Alaska and travel all the way to Appalachian, Ohio, with the work of Stephanie Kendrick. And Stephanie is also a frequent contributor to Sheila-Na-Gig Online, and has also running an amazing little writing group that I've been honored to be a part of, the Athens Poets and Storytellers. And it's so open, and you don't have to be in Appalachia to be part of it. And but it's really become a nice little home for me recently. So welcome, Stephanie. I'm glad I can open a space for you to come, because you're so open with your space.
Thank you so much, Hayley. I really appreciate it. I'm going to do two pieces, if that's okay. I have a new one I'm going to try out, and then one that Hayley has published, which is one of my favorites. So I typically, for the past year, I just have written about the collective women. And so obviously those pieces vary. This one in particular is about mad women. Look all the way to the fingertips, abused by our own mouths. So many people are the tips of our fingers, chewed raw until it hurts to hold on to anything. We are the palms of outstretched hands. How many women can fit here, balanced on lines that stretch from knuckle to wrist? We are dewdrops on a gum leaf tree. Can you see your smile in here? See the way we move so we won't disrupt our own surface tension that holds us here. So many people, these reflections, staying so still, trying not to burst. Look again at the fingertips, rough edges calloused to the core. So many people are the hardened skin of our hands, stripped bare only to heal again and again until nothing else gets through. We are fists of overflowing arms. How many of you have felt this heat, synapse sparks that spew like lava from your mouth? We are the spikes on a honey locust tree. Can you find a way to hold us anyway? Sharp and ready, we wait for unsuspected touch, blanket the ground with the dead that falls from us. We share these parts of ourselves with you, beg you to rip them out, smile as you carry them away. That was Mad Women, and this next piece that was published by Hayley in Sheila-Na-Gig Online is Baptism. If you think I'm going to bend backwards, head first in the shallow end of the Ohio River, you have rocks for brains. Those other kids lined up to be preyed on, pastor sweating, tears drip from his pores, turn to steam before cutting the surface. Tension punctuates our stories. Catfish big as cars swallow men whole. Bobby Joe getting hickeys on the Russell Bridge, not making it home that night. Every damn time I have water to my knees, I am swimming away from boys who want to dunk me under, see me drown, and still come back for air. No thank you, preacher man. Acid draining from the holes in your face. Soaked through that Sunday suit, I see the stains. And there's not enough sludge in this whole damn river to wash us clean. Thank you guys, and thank you so much, Hayley.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's always a pleasure. And our next reader is also from our Southeast Ohio region, and I've had the honor of reading with her before, which has been great. And this is Shei Sanchez. Hey, Shei.
Hi. Thanks, Hayley.
You always come to us with great backgrounds too. You always have great.
I'm with my goat right now, and so we're just in the field. They're having their dinner. So, Kirsten, your work is wonderful, and everyone who's read, been enjoying it, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to read two, if that's okay. And they're both fairly new poems. One is inspired by my very goats. So here we go. It's called Composition. Tugging my coat sleeve while I sit on a moss-laden log, she initiates our anthem, the first measure marked by her trembling bleat. Her plea pierces the brisk morning air, coaxing me to place my stiffened palm on her nape, my fingers sighing as they melt into her soft, warm fur, sanctuary from the frost still biting my skin. My hand moves along her spine, adagio, dolce, a tranquil cantabile, one that undulates with the waves of the sunlight seeping through the nearly naked trees, the pianissimo whisper of the breeze slipping between their bent bows. She tilts her head to scratch her back with her horn, a motion in sync with the chime of the wind. Then, Thejura. She shifts the angle of her snout to sniff the dirt-pocked landscape of my winter lair, rich with the scent of goat, hay, earth. Behind me, her fellow caprine presses his long face against my scapula. Enter a D major chord, two sharps on my back as he buries a mark of ownership and affection over and over until I turn around, hand on the space between his horns, for a rub impromptu, a gesture fermata. Smaller the distance between our faces, human and animal equal in height. He standing, I sitting. His breath perfume of alfalfa, timothy, Sudan grass, inches away from my morning musk of rice, bulgur, carrots, collard greens. Consonants. My round predator eyes alight on his rectangular ones, a dark, glassy horizon adapted by beasts of prey. The geometry drawn by our seeing organs meeting on the same plane, connected by trust. Do you recognize me? My mezzo-soprano asks him. His jaw loosens as if to affirm our camaraderie, but he puffs his cheeks, andante, into ovoid globes, the cud churning with each revolution. His half-sister returns from her browse, sated by the smattering of found acorns on autumn's floor. Ready for an encore, she tugs again, this time goading me to place my hand on her head too. I comply and play the same sweet song. That's on my goats. And this one is also new, bit more also personal, about loss. It's called Something Solid. Your papa passed away. The first notification of my workday, I wish I didn't answer. Under the suffocating fluorescent light, I searched for something solid but couldn't find it, as if my eyes lost focus. Instead, they cast a lifeless stare on my screen, the white background suddenly too bright, the paperwork on my desk suddenly meaningless, Ma's avatar motionless, like a crying baby fallen asleep, like my heart wanting to cry. I felt her tears streaming down on the other side of the line, my cheeks, his cheeks, still dry. He probably pressed them close to his when he rocked me to sleep while singing Like a Rhinestone Cowboy. You liked that, he once told me, during one of our rare, brief phone conversations. My hands cradled my phone. Remarkable, they were not shaking. I waited for Ma's ellipses, maybe a life sign of empathy, an emoticon of regret. Anything. Nothing. She didn't type. My coworker's voice stabbed the air. Is everything okay? She ventured. I kept my face down, my lips parted enough to let life in and out of me softly, but I barely felt my breath. I searched for something solid. His eyes smiling at me when I first met him as a little girl, his smile beaming when I visited him in my birth city as an adult, his voice deep when I heard him say, I love you always, Anak. I waited for her ellipses. I couldn't say it, because it cannot be true. Not that day, a December morning that the Ohio sky colored gray. 38 years as his daughter collapsed in one message. My dad died, I said. It hung in the air until it felt true. Solid. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Shei. Like that goat poem is a tour de force for sure. Wow. Love to see that on the page. Great. All righty. We're missing another person. So George, we're going to be jumping to you. Let me find George's stuff. So George Franklin will be up next, coming to us from Miami, Florida. And George's book, some of you have already mentioned. We have a new book coming out for George on Sheila-Na-Gig Editions. This is The Noise of the World. And this one is just in our final stages of being put together. So very excited to get this one out there. It's a big one too. Wow, it's 142 pages of George Franklin's amazing work. So
don't tell them that. Don't tell them that. Nobody will buy it.
Okay, it's only 140 pages.
Better.
There we go. And then I also had the pleasure of publishing George's first collection with Sheila-Na-Gig Editions when he won our first manuscript contest in 2018. And he had been a contributor of Sheila-Na-Gig before that, but this really solidified our friendship together. And it's just been a wonderful journey to keep getting George out there. Okay. So welcome, George.
Thank you.
And Ximena's here too. So.
Yep, this is Ximena Gomez. Yeah, thank you, Hayley. You're as always absolutely terrific, and you know these books would never have happened without you. You know, so thank you very, very much. And Hayley, really, to echo what Kersten said, Hayley is just the most remarkable editor. She's terrific. I thought what I would do would be to start with reading a poem that was in Sheila, I think about a year ago, I forget exactly, a mythological poem called Kenosis. The turning passages wrap round themselves, intestines of adolescent girls and boys, skulls broken, arms twisted askew or off. All the time, Theseus dreams of a bronze sword cutting the fetid air, a spool of white thread that unwinds as he walks, the breathing of a creature that didn't ask for birth or death, that never wanted to be part of a story. The labyrinth does not contain Theseus or the beast he'll kill. The labyrinth coils tight inside them both. It's growing late, though who can tell in that skyless dark. The Minotaur feels sleepy, flesh drunk. The horns on his head bend toward the ground. Theseus will not come tonight. He is still a dream, another passage, one that turns when it appears to go straight, that ends at a blank wall where bull and man collide, look up, and recognize each other. Familiar as the face in the bathroom mirror, the screen of the television when it darkens, or the glass frame on the photograph above your desk. If the Minotaur cries out, the cry is sharp-pitched and sudden. Tomorrow, the philosophers will gather near the marketplace. Presidents and cabinet ministers will settle their differences over chilled wine and platters of shrimp curled like small fingers. Tank commanders will give the order to fire. Tomorrow, the philosophers will teach the principles of government. How much grain should be distributed? What day of the month unemployment checks should go out? Whether prostitutes should pay taxes. In the labyrinth, the Minotaur is either asleep or dead. It's too dark to see which. Theseus is on a ship headed back to Athens, his black sail engorged with wind, his thread abandoned, trailing like a vein or artery toward a dry, broken heart at the earth's center. Far away, Daedalus stands on a hilltop weeping. Far away, Icarus crashes into the sea. Thank you. It's so odd to, like see soundless applause. It's a very strange thing, I think, to notice. The other poem I was going to read is a Miami poem. We have this sort of legendary place down here, Cafe Versailles. If you're Spanish, maybe it's Cafe Versailles. But it's where the Bay of Pigs was planned. It's sort of a center of the Cuban community in Miami. And they've got this huge sort of dining room in the back with all these mirrors, and it's very bright and lots of noise. At Cafe Versailles, my friend Luis tells me all we are is memories. We're sitting in the back of Cafe Versailles, the noise of plates, silverware, conversations ricocheting off the mirrors. I think suddenly of those years when my mother began to lose remembrance. Fear my father, believed that gypsies, gangsters, even monkeys were in the next room planning to harm her. At the same time, she feared losing him, climbing into his bed at the hospital, refusing to leave. He was post-op and hurting. Maybe Luis is right, and that sideshow with our eyes closed is all there is, things we thought important enough to file away for later. Even now, so much isn't where it should be. I don't remember her voice without effort, and I can't be sure I'm right. Luis says quantum theory proves we can't be sure of anything. I tilt my cup to find the last drip of foam from my cortado, and I disagree. Tell him that in this world, people who walk out in the street get hit by cars. Movement's predictable, but maybe Luis is right. None of us seem to be able to predict our end. Vallejo accepted. Did he really die on a Thursday in Paris? I'm not sure. The waiter brings our check, and we maneuver between tables out to the parking lot. A light rain turns the street black and shiny. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Thanks. If you can hear that one.
Thank you, Hayley.
All righty. Okay, we have 3 more readers who have signed up for our open mic, but we did have 2 who did not show up who signed up. So I'm wondering if Ximena, you might want to read something, and also Stan Rubin is here too. If you'd like to read something, we can come back to you if you want to maybe get something together. I can do that.
I think we can twist Ximena's arm.
Okay, you know, I'm not a native speaker of English. I'm fluent, but I feel a little bit shy to read in English. So I will read a very, very short one in Spanish, and George will read it in English if you don't mind.
That's
Okay?
great.
Okay.
Yeah. Do
Okay.
but now? Yeah, you would do it now.
Okay. This is called Juego de Sala. Después que la cremaron, saqué el juego de sala. 2 hombres se llevaron el cargamento de pana verde, de resortes y espuma. El espacio quedó desocupado. Barrí las flores de pelusa, el polvo, células de piel muerta, pelo, fibras y un poco de carcoma escondidos por días debajo de los 2 sofás. Las persianas se quedaron abiertas. El sol del mediodía sobre el embaldosado brillaba con una claridad desconocida. Luego, cuando me acostumbré a esa luz de sol, a ese vacío, ella se instaló allí. En esa habitación desierta, en esa luz oblicua de las tardes. Nadie la vio, yo no la vi tampoco, pero allí estaba, muy pequeña, sutil, omnipresente, ocupando el vacío que dejaron los muebles.
Living room set. After she was cremated, I got rid of the living room set. 2 men carried off the load of green corduroy, springs, and foam. The space was left empty. I swept up flowers of lint, dust, hair, dead skin cells, fibers, and a few insect droppings hidden for days under the 2 sofas. The blinds remained open. The midday sun on the tiles shined with an unfamiliar clarity. Then, as I got used to that sunlight, that vacancy, that's where she settled. In the deserted room, the oblique afternoon light. No one saw her. I didn't see her either, but there she was, quite small, subtle, omnipresent, filling the space left by the furniture.
Nice.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you. And George and Ximena have a couple of books out together, collections with Spanish and English translations. So please feel free to put the links up for that, George. And I meant to mention Stephanie too has a book coming out from Main Street Rag soon that is in pre-sales right now. So Stephanie, please go ahead and put that link up, and everybody else too. If you have books that you want to share the links for, please feel free to put them up in the chat room. Okay, so great. All righty, we will move forward with our next officially signed up speaker, and this is Betsy Mars. And Betsy comes to us from my hometown in Torrance, California. And next time I get to go back there, I'm sure we'll actually meet at some point. Betsy,
I hope so. Yeah, well, I assume then the pandemic will be over and we'll be able to meet. So that would be great. Yeah, I was very fortunate. I don't remember how I came to know of Sheila-Na-Gig, but it's just such a wonderful publication. And I love these readings, and everybody, all the open mics have been so great, and I've got everything up on my other monitors, so I've been reading along when I can. It's just been wonderful. And I bought Kirsten's book while we've been on too, because I'm just and I'm an impulsive book buyer. So I was saying earlier, if you were here, that I was debating what to today, and I wanted to read something that I've had published in Sheila-Na-Gig, but it's a significant date for me. And so I decided to first read one. If you know, Alex Trebek from Jeopardy had died today. And I grew up, as I'm sure a lot of you did, watching him. I mean, I think we always made sure that we were ready to watch Jeopardy every evening. And my dad, when he was in rehab one time after he was ill, that was my shift. I would always go over in the late afternoon and stay through Jeopardy, and then I would leave. So This one is from that time period, and it's in honor of Alex Trebek and also my father. And it's called Sunnyside Care Home. Privacy curtains draw jeopardy, our nightly routine, a bond before parting. The tray pushed aside, broth and blended brown mounds, reeking of spoon-fed infancy. We listen for questions to which we know the answers. In the same room, behind curtain number 2, a man keeps a vigil, silent like his silent twin, united again in this sterile womb. Final jeopardy after the next commercial break. We wait expectantly. Before the question can be revealed, a soft voice from behind the curtain requests our pardon. We mute the TV. He tells us his brother has just passed. In solidarity, we turn off the TV. That's how death can happen. The question we will never know. And then, thank you. The other poem I wanted to read was in honor of my mom, because today would have been her 88th birthday. And sadly, she's been gone for 20 years. She died at 67, which was not far off from where I am now. So it's really hard to contemplate, you know, how she's been gone a long time now. And this is in my book, which has the cover picture that is also my background. And it's a picture that I took when I was in London a few years ago. But the poem is called Aromatherapy for my mother. Hanging empty in the closet are the outlines of the physical reality of you. Frequently worn items spared or not yet relinquished to moths or goodwill. Just your size, your style, the outer shell of the outer you. If I hold them up to my ear, will I hear the sea? If I could feel them, especially that purple ultra suede coat that was custom made for you, would your earthly body return? A few bottles of your nail polish solidify in the medicine cabinet. Your favorite colors. One last effort to maintain control over one aspect of your beauty that the cancer which took your hair, bloated you, took away your bladder control and your lovely legs could not destroy. The pull of the bed finally caused your muscles and organs to atrophy, but your nails were your domain. Most importantly, the remains of a bottle of French perfume that was your staple when I was small, and you were an impossibly beautiful scented goddess, and I was my truer self. And all of you always, one whiff upon cracking open the cracking box is all it takes to reconnect me with me as I ride home to myself on an evaporating trail of fumes. And that reminded me of curating, you know, so I've been curating for 20 years and I still have that perfume in those bottles of nail polish. And next up is my collaborator, Alan Walowitz. So I'll let Hayley introduce him, but thank you for having me read today.
Great, thank you, Betsy.
Thank you.
And you're right, next up is a very frequent contributor to Sheila-Na-Gig online is Alan Walowitz. And you might talk, Alan, about some of the things you and Betsy have collaborated on as you introduce yourself for us.
Yes, well, I'm beaming to you from New York. It's a beautiful, beautiful day here. And Betsy and I are working on a book called In the Muddle of the Night, and it's a dual chapbook, and we hope to see it in print one day. We thought 2020, but it looks more and more like 2021. Wonderful reading today, features and open readers. I'm thrilled to be here. This poem is called Raking, in honor of the time of year. And as in most of my poems, there's an element of nostalgia to it. Raking. Starter home, I venture, As I pass the young fellow raking leaves shed by the maple and oak and red oak, which lined the street long before any of us arrived, it could be a finisher, he laughs. We've practiced this before, as maybe he considers how he's going to pay for this tiny cape plunked down in what the realtor convinced him was the best school district on the North Shore. Then I remark my way back, nursing an old man's coffee, the 99-cent special from the Mobile on the go, muddy, bitter, and tall to last me all day, as he wrestles leaves into a black plastic bag that's sure to decompose in some far-off future. Even his son, who's playing in the leaves, will never see. Back in the day, I say, we used to burn them. Huh? He replies, looking as if this were a joke he might have also heard before, and takes a few off the stack, steals a look left, then right, for the imagined environmental cops or volunteer fire brigade out to raise money for their fancy new truck. Then, from his pocket, he takes a Bic and lights an oak leaf, then a maple, then another still, till he has in hand a long-lost autumn fire. The wind's blowing my way, and I breathe a bit of my childhood that some days I try to forget. Smells good, I say, not wanting to let on the places I've just been taken, the fires up and down the streets, the crackle of leaves still a little wet, the men just back from the war, some somber, some sober, some trying to be, tending the home fires now and wondering what it had all been about, the loss, the hope, the generation growing inside, already tending the slow burning fires of mistrust and resentment, and no one taking a moment to venture a reason why. This second poem was in Sheila-Na-Gig, I think, over the summer, and it was my attempt to not wish these days away. The joke is nobody knows what day it is during the pandemic, and I just wanted to find some good in it. This one's called These COVID Days. Wisdom alone and our higher self ought to say, these days are just handed to us, not quite for free, but almost gifts, and we ought to be unto them like worker bees, charged only with avoiding the mediocrity of substandard honey, under-pollinated and worse. Too much delay in what ought to be its joyful. What a waste. Hours spent thinking, just another swamp in this, the daily grind, the sameness, the futility, the muck up to our knees. And isn't it time for tea? Or better yet, happy hour, so we might get lost in the empty space of the dusk, or whatever we name the darkness that seems like the plague, bound to swallow us. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for making it here today and sharing those wonderful pieces. Amazing. Great. Okay, and our next reader, back to Ohio again, and with Sean Kelbley. And Sean, I don't know if your video was working. Oh, there you are. You made it. Okay, good. And I see Barbara's made it too. So Barbara, we'll come back to you in line, okay? All right. All right. So Sean is another one of our quarterly contest winners. So his work has jumped out to me in various forms. So welcome, Sean, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. I forgot to unmute. I should be better at that by now. So I work in the schools and we're doing a lot of Zooming. At home, I do not have great internet, so I hope I survive this reading. Hayley, thank you so much for printing me, for publishing me. And I thought I would read that poem. It's from last year, almost exactly, I think. Cancer's back. This time, a jacked up pickup truck, off-roading through your innermost interior. At the chemo suite, I hold your hand and watch you fill with necessary poison. This is the last defense. Already, you've been excavated like the love canal, irradiated. Inside my wallet is a picture from before. You as a panoply of muscled vistas, preserved, maintained with weights and cardio and filtered water, antioxidants and yoga, and the right amount of sleep. You as good steward to a landscape. Our trip out west, remember? Assholes ruined that too. A frat kid back turned to the silent lip of the Grand Canyon, screaming, "Gimme French fries," into withered Arizona. Scabby arms in Colorado, tossing garbage from a Jeep Grand Cherokee to both sides of the Continental Divide. Noisy trash. It just shows up and thumps and woofs and tweets its tribal code to all the other freaks through speakers piled high behind the cab. It yells, "Let's party." It goes coal rolling. It wants to turn each desert into Burning Man. Thanks. So I'm lucky. I've got a lot of friends on here today, and some people I am so happy to just be meeting. So I apologize to those who have heard this one before, but I could not do 2 death poems. And at the time I signed up, I got that last slot and I thought I cannot end with death. There's got to be some sort of resurrection. And it's Sunday and it's coming up on the holidays. So I'll give you a sermon in a persona poem. This is called Lutefisk Lays the Word of Cod on Gretchen from Edina. When you compare me to the ugly Christmas sweaters and wield me with a brittle laugh against your ex's fiancé, you're marrying into this. When you dismiss me as the punchline of an ethnic joke, too uncool to even be a dare, and let your middle schooler eat instead the meatballs. Don't act surprised when pastor finds him vaping in the bushes. I see it all from heaven, Gretchen. There's fish heaven. You have the house, the alimony, a wine chiller. You have 4-wheel drive and want to speak with managers. Have you forgotten how they came, the great and great-great-grandparents, to Minnesota? They only had each other, but their poverty was clean. Gelid years of salt and lie and thrift and Lutheran Jesus. So many sanitary hands prepared this meal. Take and eat. My body, their substantiation, sacred as the bland communion wafers. What greater love than giving up oneself to nourish others? It tastes intentional, like sacrifice and soap. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sean. I like that poem with that light streaming in behind you. It just, adds to the effect of all of that. That's great. All righty, and Barbara Sabol made it, so I'd like to welcome you to read Barbara. And Barbara was the second winner of our annual manuscript contest in 2018 or 19, I believe, with her book Imagine a Town.
Thank you.
So happy to have you here. And we were saying earlier that haven't gotten around to everybody having their own kind of moment. So what we need to do a featured reading with you as well,
right,
at some point. So that'd be great. All right, so I'm just gonna let you take it away, Barbara.
All right. First, I apologize. I apologize, Kirsten. I so wanted to hear your reading. I was outside raking leaves thinking it was an 8 o'clock reading. It's November the 8th at 4, and I was thinking 8 o'clock. So I apologize for arriving so late, but I'm glad I finally made that realization. So anyway, thank you very much, Hayley. And nice to see everybody and meet everybody. I'll read 2 poems from the book, Imagine a Town. The first one is a tribute to an old roller coaster at a decrepit amusement park here in Ohio, Chippewa Lake. Sean, I don't know if you are familiar with that. It goes way, way back, actually to the 1800s. So it's been slowly falling down through the years. And now the roller coaster which was called the Big Dipper, is just about all on the ground at this point, but it has this very nostalgic, almost haunted feel about it. So this is an ode to the Big Dipper. Slip with me, child, through the ragged cyclone fence. The air here sparks. Let's walk by the feeble coaster where the wind turns shrill. Even the silver rocket in orbit over Chippewa Lake was eclipsed by the Dipper's serpentine reach. See how the bindwood twines the latticed frame, and dried thistle, ironweed, scale the corkscrew tracks that carried cars slow, slow to the rise, then plunged, unhinged our grip to level earth, now undone by oaks that split the cross ties, nail and bolts, that collapse the rickety shell of a thrill into the abandoned park's understory. Oh, Dipper, splintered bone heap of reckless joy, wooden relic of amusement, heart in the throat conveyance, you are restored in memory's gyres. I am transported to 10, trespassed here at your crumble foot, behemoth, splayed to the sky, to your namesake constellation, given over to a sad gravity. You bow to the earth of our daring, our once shudder. And thanks, everybody. And this one is a little darker. Around this time in November in 1915, listen to me, 2015, getting the right century here. 2015, there was an attack in Paris, horrible event. Hundreds of people wounded, many killed, an ISIS attack. It's called Vertige. It's still, actually it's a hard one to read. Anyway, so the epigraph is by Victor Hugo. He who contemplates the depth of Paris is seized with vertigo. Nothing is more fantastic. Nothing is more tragic. Nothing is more sublime. How odd, everyone said, the trees clinging to their color this late into November. A boon of pleasant, of beauty. The sassafras yellows deepened, lobes palm up to the Indian summer sun. They glowed past dusk. The maples burnt orange bled into wing seeds, tempting the wind to spin them into air. Yes, unseasonably warm, a wonder, everyone said. The buckthorn's greens stayed longest, sprigs of berries ripe into snow, tricked the robins into staying past ground freeze. Plucky along the tree lawn, the trees bore their foliage to the elements, dry tick and scrape of leaves in the uncommon breeze. We kept our sleeves rolled, slept with the windows open. Our beach held open its broad, rusty parasol against the rain. My neighbor and I often meet beneath it, talk about the world, how it's changed, what we're fixing for supper. Last night, we stood breathing in the sweet decay. Rain popped the leaves overhead, awoke to a great, unpredicted gust that shook the leaves, a carpet of red over the wet, black pavement. Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm glad you got leaves raked and you were able to make it. So that's great. All right. Stan Rubin, would you like to close us up today? I know you weren't signed up, but you're frequent Sheila-Na-Gig contributor. I'd like to invite you to do that. You're unmuted. Yeah, you need to unmute.
Got it. You got me. Just pulled a couple of unfairly small, light things. I tend to be minimalist. These aren't exactly minimalist, but I feel like contributing just because I love the reading so much. You run really a high quality thing and meeting the poets. I got to see it. One of them I know from another writing group. I've never seen his face. That's Walowitz, Alan Walowitz. Good poet. So's George. I've read his work. Anyway, I've read all of you guys somewhere. This is a little thing called Gust. These are very recent. The October sky. This is Gust, G-U-S-T. The October sky darkens, my hat flies off in a sudden gust from nowhere, which is how gusts come, the way love comes, when the pressure changes and a ghost blows through you so that you become a different person with a different hat and a heart of air. Where did it go? That immense, unaccountable wind, the unasked for loss of control that almost swept you toward another life. I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Thank you, guys. This is the other fellow who joined is Frank Judge, who happens to run a Zoom set I attend sometimes and have read for, called Rochester Poets from Rochester, New York. So that's who he is down there.
All right, thank you, Stan, for rounding us up. And thank you, everybody, for being here and participating, taking time out, and again, for helping make Sheila-Na-Gig online what it is today. It's just been amazing to meet all these amazing writers across the globe. And Kersten, again, thank you for your featured reading, and all of you. I look forward to continuing to see your work and support you all. And thank you.
Hayley, nice to see you.